Hey guys, it is SciCry. I've got a treat for you today. There's nowhere else on the internet that you're going to see what you're going to see in this video, all put together the way we're going to look at it. There's more information here than I've ever seen on this topic. There's more references and more analysis done here than you're ever going to see anywhere else on this topic, probably because most people are afraid to do it. But what we're going to look at in this video is Stephen Hawking, how the three of him fooled us. Now the title kind of gives away some of the end game here, but it doesn't give away everything. There's some things at the end of this video that I think will surprise even the biggest skeptics, the biggest conspiracy theorists. You got to stick with me for this. There's a lot that goes into this video, more than I have ever seen explained or talked about anywhere, which is why I'm doing it, because this excites me too and interests me. And just know as a disclaimer that my goal here is not to disparage any person, is not to slander or denigrate anybody or anyone's memory. But what I am aimed to do here is to try to expose some evidence, some truths, so that we are not taken as fools by the people that perpetrate these lies upon us. And the lie of an alternate possibility for creation is one that has been spewed forth from our educational system for decades, and especially by this man and what was portrayed as this man's teachings. And so we're going to break that down too a little bit. But just let me reiterate that there is nowhere else on the internet you're going to see what we're going to look at in this video. So strap in, hold on tight, and bear with me. There's a lot to go through. This may end up being a long video, but some of, again, the evidence we're going to go through is not available anywhere else. So let's start talking about this Stephen Hawking. So here's the chapters of this video we're kind of going to go through. We're going to talk briefly about his major life events so we all have an understanding of the, quote, history of Stephen Hawking. Then we're going to talk about his physical attributes, a few different ones that changed over time or seemed to. We're going to then mention his robotic voice, his artificial voice system that he uses. We're going to talk about some different timelines and how he seemed to change over the years. Then we're going to do a chapter called The Tale of Three Amigos. Then we've got a section that's called The Weirdest Thing Yet, and that is where we're going to see some things that I have literally never heard or seen before, but we're going to look at some evidence, some interesting things that just may blow your mind. And then at the end, we're going to talk about a reason for everything. And we're going to talk about the motive behind why this was done. So, let's get started. Let's talk first about his major life events. So let me switch my screen here so that it is a little more easy to see those slides. But in 1942, supposedly Stephen Hawking was born, all right? And then by 1962, age 20, he met this lady, and this was time he was in college. Her name Jane Wilde, and he met her at a party. He was diagnosed with ALS. This is Lou Gehrig's disease in 1963. So he started the onset of some symptoms supposedly while he was in college. And there are pictures of him with a cane, but by all other aspects, seemingly normal, standing on 2 feet, walking around. And then in July, by the way, with Lou Gehrig's disease, he was given a diagnosed life expectancy of 2 years from 1963. I don't know that we're going to go into it, but the basic life expectancy for Lou Gehrig's disease, or ALS, is between 2 and 10 years for everybody who gets it. And there are some rare cases where it is very slow to affect the person, and they have been known to last, other than Stephen Hawking, by the way, other than him, some have lasted up to 20 years with the disease. But obviously that's like 1 in 10,000. 1 in a million maybe. In 1965, on July 14th, he married Jane Wilde, that he had met in college. In 1968, he was then, by that point in the progression of his disease, he was now confined to a wheelchair by 1968. By 1978, he could no longer speak, purportedly. In 1983, his wife, Jane Wilde, falls in love with another man, Jonathan Hellyer-Jones, a family friend. And when Stephen Hawking finds out about this, he says that that's okay. And then in 1985, Stephen visits CERN and contracts pneumonia, and he ends up with a tracheotomy. Some of the photos you may have seen of him, he's got a tracheotomy, a trach pipe in his throat, right? And so in 1986, he receives this talking machine and software that we are so familiar with when we see him. From that point on, all of his appearances, he was talking with the software, this artificial voice. So he's done interviews, seminars, teaching, all these different things since then with an artificial voice that supposedly is generated off of a panel that's mounted to his wheelchair. We'll talk more about that later in a different section. In 1990, in February, Stephen leaves Jane, who had already said she was seeing this other man. He leaves her for Elaine Mason. And in 1995, he actually files for divorce with Jane, and then in September marries Elaine. In 2006, Stephen divorces his wife, Elaine. And so apparently he just didn't want to keep a wife, because he actually initiated the divorce with both of them, supposedly. In 2009, he could no longer drive his wheelchair by himself, is what has reported. And then in 2018, in March, on the 14th, he dies at his home in Cambridge. So that is the very broad overview of his life events and kind of the progression there. And of course, most of that time, he also, from the time of college up to, I think, in the mid-80s, he was still teaching, supposedly, at Cambridge as a adjunct professor, and he did also stayed there, lived there, and did his research there, supposedly. So I think that gives you the picture of his life, kind of, in broad terms, what things happened. Some of those dates are going to be more important as we go, but for now we'll leave it there as far as his life events. So the next thing we need to really think about and look at are some physical attributes. Just based on the title, that I'm probably suggesting that all the times that we have seen Stephen Hawking in the media, on TV, for different events, I'm suggesting that it's not always the same man. And so what's important in anything like this situation, we're trying to identify a person, is their physical attributes, specific, especially parts of their face that are recognizable, that you can then match over time through photography. So that's exactly what I've done. And we're going to start by looking at his ear. We're going to do 3 different facial features that we're going to look at specifically. But we'll start with his ear. And so we'll go all the way back to the beginning. So 1945. So he was born in, I think, 42. So he was about 3 years old here. And you can see just generally, get in your mind the shape of his ear here. He's got this ridge. And this part is what's most important right here. This kind of ridge that's inside his ear. I think that is the most key aspect that we're going to need to look at through time, because that seems to be something that does change. So you can see in 1951, just a few years later, this picture was more blurry, but it seems like that's the same ear as in 1945. 1959, a better picture, but again, from the far left, you see that seems like the same ear, the far left being when he was 3 years old. And in 1959, he's about 18, I think. I'm not doing the math there, but it seems like the same ear. And here in 1965, seems like the same ear, doesn't it? It's just turned a little more towards you. So far, we're seeing the same ear over and over again through these years, these time periods. 1970, now that's turned a different direction, but again, it seems like this possibly is still the same ear. And again, I'm particularly looking at the ridge, which is in this curve shape, and then this inner ridge that goes like this. And it's the same on here, and this goes like this. It's a very smooth, this inner one also is a very smooth curve, right? It's not, some people have very jagged kind of cartilage formations. This one is very smooth. So I think that's what we're looking at here. So in 1975, we have another shot of that same ear, and that looks very similar. You can see again here, we have the top ridge, the inner, and then now we have another clue, and that's this inner shape. At this angle is very distinctive. You see that here? It's the same thing with this inner ridge and the same shape on the top outer ridge. All right. So we're doing a very close forensic analysis of these photos, but it's going to give us some ammunition in a minute. And so 1979, now this ear again, it's turned and it looks like it may be kind of smushed on his shoulder there, but it seems like we're seeing the same ridge on the top, same inner ridge. It's very smooth, and we can't see the inner shape like on this 1975 photo, but it does seem like that's still the same ear that we're looking at. Now this one in 1983 also seems to be very similar to that, doesn't it? Very similar, same shapes. Now I will say this part in here is very odd looking. It's a very strange shape we're looking at there, but I do think that this, well, I don't know, because now we're getting into some of the strange shapes. So I don't know if you can see all these at once, but from there to there, I think we're starting to see some differences here. So 1983 shot, I still think is our guy. It's the same shaped ridge, the same long curved inner ridge, but this person in 1989, and these are all taken from shots that were purported to be Stephen Hawking. Now this upper ridge, because it's turned more towards us, it's harder to tell this particular photo, but this inner ridge does not seem, it seems like it's going like more like this. It's tighter, it's not as long. Do you see how his on this side is very long, elongated? And this one seems to be tighter in. The inner part of his cartilage in his ear is much smaller than the person in 1983. So that does seem to be quite different. Let's keep looking. 1992, this shot. This seems again to be more like this person with a smaller inner ear. And you see that too? There's this bump here. And there's the bump here. Now this other person in the prior years didn't seem to have that bump. This little bump here is not on this shot. It's not here. It's not on that guy. And the thing about ears is no matter what your physical condition or disease or otherwise, your cartilage shape in your ears does not change over time. It just doesn't change after you're done. You know, we saw his 3-year-old picture, seemed a little smaller, less grown, but that after you grow to about, you know, age 15, 10 or 15, the ear shape does not change at all, no matter what's going on with you, unless you have some kind of accident where your ear is damaged. And that is not the case that we know of with Stephen Hawking. So these ears, again, are not feeling to me like the original ears. 1995, now this one, to be honest, seems like, I don't know, that's tough. That's a hard photo because it's a little blurry. So let's kind of probably pass by that one for now. Again, this ridge here on the 1983 and in these previous ones, do you see that? That ridge goes all the way up almost into the top of the ear. And in this person, it just doesn't. It's not the same. It just doesn't. I think this 1995 is the same as these two previous. Now 2001, now this ear to me, I don't know, that's tough because it's again turned more towards us, but again, this does not look like our original ear. It doesn't look like this ear to me. It just doesn't look like this ear. I'm hesitant to say it looks like this ear in 1992, but it might look to me a little more like that. You know, it does. What does look like that ear to me, if you can see it, look right here. You see this little fold? That little fold in the ear right there? Keep an eye on this fold. And let me scroll back over now. You see that? That fold is right there on the 2001 shot. That fold is right here. So I believe that's the same guy there. Now this ear, again, 2002 ear, this looks like the same one we've been looking at, but not the original one. So in this ear, this ridge, again, is tight. There's a bump at the bottom. We have this little ridge here, fold under. And in the older shots, this ridge was going way up here into the top of the ear, not in this one. And I believe that if we went back and looked at just earlobes, we would see that this one is different than that original one as well. Let's just keep moving here. Now 2004. Now these ears look to me totally off the charts. I haven't yet seen a precedent for this ear in 2004. It's much meatier. It has, for instance, this kind of collapsing. Now, it's possible that his ear in this shot is smashed, but the meatiness of this ear, it just looks a lot different than anyone we've seen up to this point. And this ear in 2006 looks like none of the ears. It's too short. It's not, wide enough. The inner ear shape here looks totally different than any of the people we've seen so far. Totally different. And it's just a long ear without much width, and that's not what we've seen in the other guys. Now 2007. Now this, honestly, 2006, 2007, 2008, these ears look the same to me. They look very similar, especially 2007 and 8 right here. 2008, now that one's a little hard to discern, and it looks like it's smashed up against his chair, so we'll pass that one. But here's 2016. Now that one, this one looks very different as well, and the reason why, again, is this bottom part is just thicker and bigger than any of the previous ears, especially from the 80s and the 70s and prior. So this ear looks totally different to me than any of those ears. None of the detail of that fold in the ear is in this one. And so in the 90s, we saw this little fold on the inside of the ear. That's missing from this shot. And so it's very hard for me to say that these are all the same ear from the same person. When you have variants like this in 2006 and 2002, look at the two of those, 2006, 2002, 2006, 2002. They don't even look close. 2001 and 2006. Now, how are those the same? 2001, 2006. I don't know about that. So I think we've kind of made the point with the ear. And the interesting thing is we're going to go through the teeth next. And they're a little more telling than just the ear was. So let's do that. Let's scroll back to the beginning. Now going to the teeth. Did I not have the teeth ready? Okay, let's do hands. Let's do the hands because the hands are important. I didn't have the teeth ready. We'll hit the teeth in just a second. So these are Stephen's hands, and you know from if you know anything about ALS, Lou Gehrig's, it causes the hands to pull in like this and to make kind of claw fists as time progresses. The fingers kind of clench up. And so in 1951, he hadn't shown any symptoms yet. He was very young. You know, I guess he's about 7 or 9 maybe. And then in 1966, now this would be just after, or I think about the time he graduated college and was about to marry his first wife. And you see now he's in his chair and his hands have started that process of his fingers pulling in. Now notice the hands don't, it's not like the hands come like this, but the fingers pull in. That's essentially what the Lou Gehrig's does for most people that have it. 1970, here's a shot. It's a little hard to see, but you can see how his right arm is underneath and you see his fingers pulled in on both hands and his left arm is on top. 1975, you see him in his chair grasping the movement joystick for his chair with his right arm and his left arm. So apparently at this time he still had some mobility with his arms. He was able to move them around and control his chair. Now in 1977, again, you see him with his right hand on the control stick. Of course, it's mounted on the right side, but his right hand on the control stick and his left hand in his lap, both with the fingers all pulled in because of his ALS. In 1980, now this is interesting, this shot from 1980, the joystick is still on the right of the chair, but he is reaching across with his left hand to work the joystick. And his right hand has the paddle for his artificial voice system. So it's just interesting that it's switched. The hands do look like the same hands, okay? The same finger positions. And so I think we're still looking at the same guy. You can see as we go through, we're looking at the same guy here. Now in 1983, again, he's not using his joystick, which is still mounted on the right of his chair, and his hands in his lap, fingers pulled in just as they should, or just as they have become because of his ALS. 1984, the same kind of thing as we saw before. He reaches over with that left hand and works the joystick on the right while he's holding the voice paddle. Of course, in this shot in 1984, he doesn't have the voice paddle and I'm not sure if the voice box is on the chair in that shot, but I have the whole shot. We'll take a look at that probably later. But you can see how he's reaching across. These look like the same hands as this guy and as this guy, okay? So far I think the hands have stayed similar, but here in 1984, now this is different. Whereas in prior years, his left hand was reaching across his body to manipulate the joystick on the right side of the chair. Now the joystick's on the left side of the chair, and he's still holding the voice paddle, voice controller, with his right hand in his lap. It's just odd that for some reason they would swap from here in 1980, where the joystick's still on the right side, even though his left arm is the one working it, to here in 1984, where they swapped it to the other side. He's working it with the same hand, but from the other side. So why was it ever on the right side of his chair if he was going to use it with his left hand? It's a hard question to answer. Now this shot from 1986 is interesting because he has both hands on 2 voice control paddles, which I actually, having watched a bunch of videos, I don't think I've ever seen him using 2 paddles to speak with his artificial voice system. But in this shot, he's got that. So I can't answer when that was at this point or why, but it's very interesting. It just seems like if he was in a condition where his arms and hands only worked certain ways, they sure changed things a lot for him. Sure changed things a lot. Now in 1992, we see him doing a similar thing in this shot to what was before, where he's manipulating the joystick on the right side of the chair with his left hand, but we have to ask ourselves, why would they move the joystick back again? In this 1984 shot, the joystick's on the left. In this 1984 shot, it's on the right. In this 92 shot, it's on the right again. In this 1995 shot, it's on the left. So do you see how this is very odd? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. One year they seem to do things one way, one year they do it another. This 1995 shot is actually a shot with him and his second wife, Elaine. And in 2000, we see him doing a similar handhold. From 1995 to 2000, it's the same. He is reaching, and look at the position of his hand on his left hand here that's using the joystick. He turns it, it's turned like inside out. It's a very strange, awkward position. I mean, I know the ALS affects people in ways like that, but it is odd that the joystick position keeps changing, and this seems like a very awkward, like if my hand working correctly was to do that, I would barely be able to manipulate a joystick like that if my hand was turned that way, even in full function. But with ALS, his hand was not in full function, and having it turned that way, this to me is sketchy. It's like, how would a person really manipulate that joystick if they had ALS, for one, and had it for, in the year 2001, he would have had ALS for about 40 years, which the life expectancy was 2 years, and he lived 40 and is manipulating the joystick for his chair in 2001 like this. It's interesting. Now, what's interesting also is these hands we've seen. Look at these hands real quick, just briefly before we move forward. See those hands right there in 1983? Now let's look at the next set of hands. In 2006, do you see these hands? These don't look anything like the hands that we've seen before. Look at how fleshy these hands are. Every shot up to this point, from 2001 even, the shot shows the hands being very slender. He's a very slender man. He was even before he had ALS, he was slender. And as he had ALS, it progressed and he got more slender because he had a harder time eating, right? Well, in 2006, apparently, his hands became very pudgy again. He gained a lot of weight. In 2006, it's the same hands. In 2007, now these hands from this shot seem very skinny again. They do. And we're going to look at this shot. This is when he's in a zero-G airplane, if you can believe that. And then in 2014, we see the same pudgy hands. And in 2016, the same pudgy hands. And of course, he passed on in 2018, according to sources. So that's the variety in the hands. Let me bring up real quick the teeth, because I think the teeth are telling as well. So, just so I make sure I can see this with you. So this being a 1962 shot of Stephen's teeth, his smile, before ALS really got a hold on him, right? Before, I don't know if, I can't remember if he was diagnosed at this time. I believe this shot has a cane. He's holding a cane. So he must have had some issues even at this time. You can see in 1965 there, that seems like the same guy, just with a bigger smile. Now this is 1979. We jumped 14 years, but I think that this still feels like the same guy. You see that smile? It's the same shape, same distance from the bottom of the nose to the top of the upper lip. And his teeth have degraded a little bit, but this seems like the same smile, okay? Same smile. Pretty straight teeth here. Now this is in 1980, this smile, and it's hard to see in this shot. Now this is 1997. Now this to me, now this is hard for me to believe that this is the same as this. It might be, but do you see the fleshiness of the face here? It's just different than these. And then look at that face. That mouth is just an odd shape. Now, this is 2001. Does this feel like this? I mean, how close are those or that? Now, to me, it's possible this and this are the same smile, because you see that tooth right here in this 1979 shot has started to decay, right? So then we move forward to this one. It's that same tooth over there that's decayed and looks like it's a clearer shot too, but it looks like, you know, a few of these teeth, they're dirty, they've started to decay. This is possibly the same, exact same individual. Very plausible that that and that are the same. Now here's a shot, 2001. Now this one I have trouble with. It's not the same smile. It's not the same lips. It's very different feeling to me. The nose looks a little bit the same. You know, it's still possible. Now this one in 2002, I cannot accept as the same person. And you know why? Because of this tooth decay. Tooth decay like this doesn't get better over time. You see this? Tooth decay does not get better over time. And so here, those same teeth, and they're not the same shape either. We have a lot of gum in this picture. You can see the gums very easily. And in this picture, there's none of that. And the teeth are not even in the same configuration or shape. And that's from 1997 to 2002, all right? But we would expect, if these are his two front teeth, we would expect this one to be decayed and brown like the other shot, but it's not. And this brown tooth over here and this brown one here are nowhere to be found in those other shots we've already looked at. You can't find them. They don't exist. They're not there. They're not there. There's some decay here, but we don't see those big brown teeth in here. And the shape of this smile, and look at the jaw protrusion. His jaw is protruding out. It's like he's got an underbite now. Where did that come from? People's bone structure just doesn't change over time. ALS paralyzes you. It doesn't change your bone structure. And so it's a hard pill for me to swallow to believe that this and this are the same. What about this? Now this and this seem like the same guy. We have these, you know, most of these teeth are pretty clean. And then there's these really dark, you know, dead teeth essentially. And so this guy looks to me the same as that guy, but not the same as this guy. Totally different. What about this guy? I think this is the same one as this. Same dead teeth, right? Same decayed teeth. And this one, I think maybe the same. This is 2005. It's so hard to tell. It really is so hard to tell. But the difference here now, this person, I don't know. I'm keeping an eye on these teeth because these seem to jut out just a little bit more than these guys. This guy apparently was still able to keep his jaw in alignment. This guy's, it's like that underbite. His jaw is poking out, right? What about that guy? That's hard to tell. That's kind of hard to tell. But yeah, that's hard to tell. And who's this guy? Now this is 2007. Where did this guy come from? This guy versus this one. Now in this shot, see his upper lip does not touch his nose. You know, the teeth are more or less straight, and in this shot they're straight, they're touching each other, there is a bite down. But this one is off the charts. This is totally different. Absolutely different. Where did these four teeth come from? Where did these four teeth come from? Is that those four teeth? I don't know really. But from 2006 or 7 onward, this is the mouth we see on Stephen Hawking. And it's totally different than all these guys. Look at beside the lips here. You see this? There's not much skin or just flesh there. There's not a lot. But on this guy, that's just everything is meaty and fleshy about his whole face. This doesn't feel like the same person in any way whatsoever. Neither does this. Even the whole shape of the mouth is downturned, which the shape of the other person's mouth was upturned. Again, this person, whoever this is, and this is 2008, with those 4 teeth and the jaw protruding so much the 4 teeth are sticking up in front of the upper lip. And that's what we see from that point on, from 2007 on. It's a totally different. And now look at this. This is again off the charts. We haven't seen this except for this person with these 4 teeth. And that's the full shot of them. That's what those teeth look like. But none of the other people had those. There he is again. This is when he's getting Medal of Freedom. There's those 4 teeth. But we can't see that in any of these shots before 2007. Those teeth don't exist. He doesn't. These teeth on this Stephen Hawking 1997. There's no way these teeth could ever be what you see in 2007. Right there, or that, or that. Now we're getting into La La Land. This is not the same person. This is not the same person. Nope. Now this is a 1988 shot. I didn't mean to throw it in that order, but you see how different it was. This is not the same person as this. That's 1988, and this is 2014. So that's that on the teeth. So I think that those physical attributes are super important to understanding that things changed over time. Things definitely changed over time with Stephen Hawking. So next we're going to talk about his robotic artificial voice. And I have a couple slides I'm just going to read to you. We're going to think about what is said here because it's important. And I found this picture of a speak and spell because one thing that I think is anomalous with his voice, his artificial voice, is that it has never changed and it has always sounded like a Texas Instruments speak and spell from my childhood. And it's just interesting to me that through time they didn't upgrade it. They always would say, well, you know, it's kind of his personality now. When people hear him speak, they relate to that voice. So they never changed it, right? Well, that's an interesting explanation, but heck, if I was Stephen Hawking, I would want my voice upgraded. I wouldn't want to stick with speak and spell. He's supposed to be one of the foremost scientists in the world. And he sticks with a 1970-something or 80-something speak and spell Texas Instruments voice all the way through 2018. It's just a little odd. So let me just read through this. I'm a fast reader, so just listen or read along. Let me change my camera again so if you're reading, you can see it. For his communication, Hawking initially raised his eyebrows to choose letters on a spelling card. But in 1986, he received a computer program called the Equalizer from Walter Wolters, CEO of Words Plus, and you can look that guy up, I did, who had developed an earlier version of the software to help his mother-in-law, who had also suffered from ALS and lost her ability to speak and write. In a method he used for the rest of his life, Hawking could now simply press a switch to select phrases, words, or letters from a bank of about 2,500 to 3,000 words that were scanned. The program was originally run on a desktop computer. Elaine Mason's husband, David, a computer engineer, adapted a small computer and attached it to his wheelchair. Released from the need to use somebody to interpret his speech, he commented that, "I can communicate better now than before I lost my voice," which is interesting. We'll talk about that. The voice he used had an American accent and is no longer produced. Interesting. Despite the later availability of other voices, Hawking retained his original voice, saying that he preferred it and identified with it. I guess he identified with the Texas Instruments Speak and Spell voice. Originally, Hawking activated a switch using his hand and could produce up to 15 words per minute. Lectures were prepared in advance and were sent to the speech synthesizer in short sections to be delivered. Hawking gradually lost the use of his hand, and in 2005 he began to control his communication device with movements of his cheek muscles, with a rate of about 1 word per minute. With this decline, there was a risk of his developing locked-in syndrome, so Hawking collaborated with Intel researchers on systems that could translate his brain patterns or facial expressions into switch activations. After several prototypes that did not perform as planned, they settled on an adaptive word predictor made by the London-based startup SwiftKey, which used a system similar to his original technology. Hawking had an easier time adapting to the new system, which was further developed after inputting large amounts of Hawking's papers and other written materials, and uses predictive software similar to other smartphone keyboards. For the past few years, he has operated the device by twitching a cheek muscle. This is in the latest parts of his life. But even when this is a quote actually. I think this might be from Carl Sagan, if I'm not mistaken, or one of the people that interviewed him. He says, for the past few years, he has operated the device by twitching a cheek muscle. But even when I interviewed him in front of an audience a decade ago, it would take him minutes to give prepared answers. Minutes to give prepared answers. The funny thing is, that's not really what we see when we see him on TV, in interviews, doing seminars. They portray those events as if he is speaking ad hoc to the people who are interviewing him. And so it's very difficult for me to believe that he is just doing that on the fly. Now, here is a shot. Let me see if I can get the shot of... Here is one of the shots of his robotic voice machine. Now, this one I think was from 1980. And you can see that's a digital screen where there's just lists of words. And we'll see in a second, we'll see a video of him supposedly using that during the interview to pick words to speak sentences, okay? And here's another shot of a different one. Now, this is from much later on. It's from much later on. But you can see how it's the same idea on this one that they had on that other screen, where he's supposedly picking words and constructing sentences on the fly. You can see there, it looks like it's constructing a sentence, you two something something, which is very interesting. Very interesting indeed. So let's do something. I want to watch a video with you that I think is going to be super interesting to you. This is a very early video from 1977 that shows Stephen Hawking, and you can hear him talking.
Black holes have gripped the imagination of a young generation of theorists like Stephen Hawking. He and another British theorist, Roger Penrose, laid down the basic principles 10 years ago. They said the black hole would possess at its center an even stranger object. All the matter of a star collapsed to a geometric point, a singularity where gravity crushes particles out of existence.
Oh, you would like me to draw a cylinder on the board, fine.
A grave physical handicap.
All right, so did you hear that? As he came up in his chair, as he comes up, you can hear him mumbling. I'll turn this up so you can hear it.
All the matter of a star collapsed to a geometric point, a singularity where gravity crushes particles out of existence.
Of course, the narrator is talking over it, so you can't really hear it. But he does this. He comes up in his chair. They part the Red Sea for him. They move the table out of the way, so apparently they know he wants to come up, and he's mumbling the whole way. He gets up to the board after mumbling about 5 sentences in mumble voice that is unintelligible. You cannot make it out. You know, I've listened to this very closely. There's no way you can make this out. And the teacher says, "Oh, you'd like me to draw a cylinder on the board." So all of that mumbling to tell him to draw a cylinder on the board, you'd think he was describing an equation for a black hole with all that talking. If they truly understood him, you'd think he would then say, you'd like me to plot out the equation for blah, blah, blah. But no, it's, you'd like me to draw a cylinder on the board.
Draw a cylinder.
It's just
on the
very
board.
A grave physical handicap
interesting.
makes Stephen Hawking's work all the more remarkable. For 13 years since his student days, he's fought a wasting disease of nerve and muscle. When his wife Jane...
All right, so there you see that this video is very interesting. And I do believe that this is the Stephen Hawking we knew originally. All right, right here. But you heard him talking, and we're still talking about his artificial voice. So let's look at this video, because in 1980, Carl Sagan did an interview with him and Arthur C. Clarke. Now, if you know anything about Arthur C. Clarke, you know he's written some very godless, evolutionary science fiction books, including Childhood's End, which involves the coming of a race of demon, satanic creatures to Earth for Earth's final destruction and culling of mankind. It's a hideous, hideous story. And there was a mini-series on, I think, the Sci-Fi Channel a few years ago about that. But Arthur C. Clarke is part of the bad guys. So it's interesting that him and Carl Sagan are here with Stephen Hawking in this video. So you can see him here. He is going to talk.
Yes. Professor Hawking, in fact, has just made publishing history by writing a book.
Yes, communication.
A history of time, and will be now Stephen Hawking, a grand wishes. Let me just explain that what happens when would explain everything. Stephen Hawking, that is quite an agenda. How are you getting on with it? Let me just explain that what happens when Professor Hawking wishes to speak. He lost his voice a couple of years ago and now has to use a voice synthesizer, and he can control a squeeze box in his hand, and on the VDU screen on the arm of his chair he's got a vocabulary which scrolls through, and he can pick out the words that he wants, and these words are then assembled into a sentence, and when the sentence is ready then he can process it through the voice synthesizer.
So it's presented in this interview as if Stephen Hawking is constructing his sentences on the fly. And that's the interviewer, Carl Sagan, interrupts. He interrupts Stephen Hawking as far as he asks him a question and says, let me tell you what Stephen Hawking has to do to speak. And so supposedly he's intimating that Stephen Hawking is constructing the words and sentences as they are going here.
So whenever
in the last 300 years, we have discovered the laws that govern the universe in all but the most extreme conditions.
It's interesting that while he's making sentences, apparently, the screen isn't moving. Nothing is changing here. And if he has a pre-recorded text that he's supposedly having it read for him, then none of these words are what he just said. This says, don't blow ourselves up, something, the end as the something. But I don't see the words. The words that are highlighted are not what he's saying.
I think there is a reasonable chance that we may find a complete set of laws by the end of the century if we don't blow.
He said a complete set of laws, but this says find a complete unified theory. What's highlighted here?
Ourselves up first. If we do find a complete unified theory, it will be a great triumph, not just for scientists, but for ordinary people as well. In time, the unified theory would be simplified and taught in schools, at least in outline.
Does he look to you like he's constructing anything? No, this is definitely pre-recorded. Now, the question is whether Stephen Hawking actually has any involvement in that speech at all. And they say he's got a hand press thing here, but let's just think about the mechanics. You can watch his hands, and I'll mute it so you can watch his hands only. Watch his hands there. Is he moving anything? Is he moving anything? There's no movement whatsoever on his hands. He's not squeezing that box. There's nothing happening. And there's nothing rigged to sense his facial movements if he's truly like possibly able to manipulate it with his cheek twitches or any of that. And apparently, you know, this person, Stephen Hawking, right at this point has found someone in the audience that looks interesting. He's just staring. He's not manipulating anything on the screen. So it's obvious that Stephen Hawking in this case is not responding to anything these guys are saying. This is all pre-recorded. It's all pre-recorded. Now, the main question we want to know is, does Stephen Hawking ever talk with his artificial voice on the fly, which is what is portrayed to us almost every time we see him, even by this host's own words. But we're going to actually continue then. That's mostly about his voice, his robotic artificial voice. Here's another shot, by the way, of him doing that with the Pope. And we're going to talk about that later too. But, you know, this same system is what we've seen for all our lives. Whenever we've seen Hawking, it's the same system. And supposedly he's able to respond to people very quickly. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look into some timelines of photography with Stephen Hawking. And you're going to see real clearly some definite shifts, some changes. But I call it timelines because it seems that we have some different timelines we can look at here. So this is pictures of Stephen Hawking, you know, every few years throughout all of his lifetime. So we can see here in 1945, he's age 3 or so. 1949, you know, these all look very similar. This is definitely the same little boy growing up. 1952, he would be about 10 or 12. Yeah, I think he was born in 1942, so it's about 10 in that suit. 1959, so he's like 17. 1962, he has met the woman he marries as his first wife, Jane Wilde, there, and this would be in the college years. 1962, graduating. I think that's his undergraduate. Maybe mistaken there, but you can see this is all the same guy. This is the same person. 1965, when he marries his first wife, Jane Wilde. And you can see he's a good-looking guy, especially as he gets into his late 20s here. Good-looking guy. Looks like one of the Beatles. 1966. Now, this still feels like the same guy. There's no problem here. Here he is with his family, Jane Wilde and his children. 1975, still teaching at this point, supposedly, at Cambridge. 1975, there with his kids. 1979. Another 1979. And the interesting thing about this one, the reason I say here it's mislabeled is because it was, when I was searching online, this photo here was labeled as a 1990 photograph at the professional source that I was looking, and it was not a 1990 photograph. This was a shot from 1979, same as this one here. It's the same chair. It's probably close to the same time. 1982, there he is in the black and white. 1982 in this color shot. This is one of the most iconic, I think, shots, especially of his early career. It was caricatured often because of the way his look there and everything in his chair. 1984, 1985, 1986. Now he's starting to look like an old man, right? Starting to really look aged, and ALS has taken a toll. The same man, but he looks from 1985 to 86 here like a lot's changed. He's really going downhill fast. And 1990, look at that look. It looks very bad. Doesn't look so hot in 1990 there. But this is definitely the same man. You can see in the 1986 versus the 1990 shot here, this is definitely the same person. Definitely. There's too many things you can see that are exactly the same. Is on his neck, the folds, the shape of his lips. He's literally using, I think, the same eyeglasses. His hair is very similar in style, but it's the same hair. The ear shape is the same. So we don't have to worry that this is not the same guy through all these shots. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to treat the next set of shots as a totally different timeline. Now look back through these. Look back through these real quick before we leave this guy. Look at these shots right here as we switch to the next person. Who's this guy? Now this guy looks quite different. 1980, 1981, 1984. And again, to see that this is the time, like, they switched his joystick to the left-hand side of his chair. 1984 right here. 1989, 1989. This, to me, this just does not even start to look like this kid right here. This is not the same person. 1992, 1995, when he married his second wife, right? 97, 2001, he meets Bill Gates. 2001, 2002, 2004, 2005. And you may recognize the teeth that we saw in the late 90s and early 2000s, were this with the dead tooth in the sides, in each side, one here, the dead tooth. Seems to be possibly the same guy who went in the zero-G airplane, and then those are from the other timeline. So that's the second timeline. So we got this guy. And we got this guy. And now we've got another guy. So tell me, who is this guy? Is that the same guy as this? Who's this guy? His face is a totally different shape. Who is this guy? This seems like a totally different person, different timeline. 2006 and forward, we see this guy. And again, if you remember the teeth, this is the guy with the teeth right there. Can't hardly see it in this shot, but in this shot it's very apparent. In this shot you see the 4 teeth sticking up because he's got that jaw protrusion, and for some reason these huge teeth on the bottom that stick up in front of his upper lip. Who's this guy? I'd like to know the answer to that question. If these guys, all their names are Stephen Hawking, because it seems like we've seen 3 different timelines of Stephen Hawking, 3 different ones. So let's do a little comparison. How about? Now this is all the same things you just saw, but all together. You can see there on the top is our first guy, Stephen Hawking. And this, I believe, is most likely the real Stephen Hawking. Again, these iconic shots from the 60s, and this one here in 1979. Then we see the other Stephen Hawking. Now, these are layered on top of each other at the same years. So in the same year that we saw this Stephen Hawking, we also saw this Stephen Hawking. In the same year we saw this Stephen Hawking, we saw this, well, not that one, that's 5 years later, but close, this Stephen Hawking. How are these guys the same guys? How are they the same person? And then as time goes on, instead of looking older, because in this top timeline, the real Stephen Hawking was getting older and older and older, until these shots, he looked like he was doing pretty bad off. But now in these shots down here, 1989, in the same time period, he looks like he has new life. He's got red cheeks again. He's got good skin. He's smiling, happy. Up here, it looks like he's hurting. He's in pain. He's not. I've seen enough people reach the end of their lives to know that that's what is happening there in those final shots in 1990 in that top timeline. Then as time goes on, we see that timeline, but then look at the change here between this guy and this one, or this one, or this one. What's up here? Are these the same? Do these look the same to you? This guy over here just doesn't look at all like this guy or this guy. To be honest, if this is Stephen Hawking, to me this cannot be Stephen Hawking. And in like manner, this cannot be Stephen Hawking. Right there. That I think what we've done here is show the ridiculousness of what we have been shown by the media as far as Mr. Stephen Hawking. Now, there just seems to be too much differential between what we've seen in each of these timelines with these different people to even consider that they're the same person. And what would make sense is that they did have to change the person out. If they wanted the effect of what Stephen Hawking was doing to continue, they would have to find a new one, because Lou Gehrig's syndrome, Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, the maximum life expectancy is 20 years. And it's like a 1 in a million chance for that to happen. The diagnosis that supposedly he got was for 2 years past the diagnosis. And, he got his diagnosis in the late 60s, the mid 60s. In this 1962 shot with his wife, he did have a cane, if I remember correctly. And you see his hands are starting to kind of pull up, like his fingers are starting to crumple up. And in 1965 there, he's got the cane. He's still got full mobility, but it is starting to affect him. And so by 1990, this Stephen Hawking was not doing well. He was not going to make it. Stephen Hawking was done. So they had to have another Stephen Hawking. And they had to have another Stephen Hawking. And why would they do that? Well, they, meaning probably the CIA or some intel agency that really likes to manipulate and push narratives for various reasons. That's a whole nother story. But they want to keep the narrative going. What's the narrative? We're going to talk about that in a few chapters of this video later on. But I think this is good to see this and to see this comparison, because it really sheds light on the fact that we just seem to see 3 different people here. At least 3 different people. So the weirdest thing yet. Now this is the section where you're going to see some things. We're going to talk about some things that I don't think I see anyone talking about online. And so when we talk about Stephen Hawking, we see all these cameo appearances he did. Now, if he was really like dedicated to his work and he's, you know, there's no other theoretical physicists or, you know, astronomers or that are in the public light like this, okay? But he had so many cameo appearances in Hollywood. It was almost like the people that run Hollywood wanted you to see him over and over and over again. In 1989, he was on The Simpsons. In 1993, he was on Star Trek. 1993 to 2009, he was on the Conan O'Brien Show with Jim Carrey and other stars. 1994, he was in Pink Floyd's Keep Talking video, I think, or it was a song, I can't remember. But in 2014, they used him again as Talking Hawking. 1993 to 2013, he was in Futurama a few different times. In 2007, he was on Big Bang Theory. In 2014, he was on Monty Python Live, mostly the live tour. In 2014, he was on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. That's actually on the internet. You can watch that. In 2016, Anyone Can Quantum, the show. In 2017, Stephen Hawking's New Voice. And so there was just, he was in Hollywood the whole time through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s and 2010s. More so than any other physicist or scientist. Stephen Hawking, over and over again. Now you got to ask yourself, why is that? He met all these different celebrities. He met Queen Elizabeth. There's Queen Elizabeth. In fact, he met her 2 different times. I'm not sure that I have both pictures, but I think there were 2 different times that he met her. He also met Bill Gates a couple different times. There he is with Bill Gates. And these are evil, demonic people. So it's interesting that Stephen Hawking is highly connected, or at least the idea of the show of Stephen Hawking is connected to these people. Barack Obama. So if you're unaware, in, let's see, what year was it? Now here's that shot of Obama awarding Hawking the Medal of Freedom in 2009, I believe. I mean, you know, Stephen Hawking was everywhere for a long time. For a guy that I don't believe could communicate and was portrayed as the foremost scientist, physics expert in the world for the longest time. But there he is. He sure got around. Whoever his handler was did a great job making sure he got in front of everybody. Now, Stephen Hawking also saw and visited Nelson Mandela, an avowed communist. Good for him. It's amazing that during his touring the world that he saw all these communist leaders and people that were essentially communists like Barack Obama. It's just very interesting, isn't it? He saw the Pope, by the way, many times. Actually, I think at least 4 times he saw the Pope. Here's one. I think that's Pope John Paul II. I may have 1 or 2 of these mislabeled. There's a different Pope. I don't remember which Pope this is, but that's a different one. Here's Pope Francis. He definitely met Pope Francis. Again with John Paul II. And Pope Benedict. Now, it's just amazing that, why was it so important for him to see the Pope every couple of years? The Pope. And then he does something that only really celebrities do. He rides the Vomit Comet, the zero-G aircraft, where you go up and they come down at a high speed and you float around. And here's some shots of him doing that, riding the Vomit Comet. It's almost funny. It's kind of like torture. It seems like that would be torture to a person with ALS. You know, since they can not move their face anyway, really, to show joy or anything else. It's just odd. It's just such an odd thing for them to do. And they said, of course, well, this is because Stephen always studied space and he wanted to go to space, but he couldn't get there because for some reason they said we couldn't get him to space before he died. Because why would that be? It seems like we had shuttles going all the time, all through the 80s and 90s. And then after that, NASA was certainly doing some things. But for some reason, you know, they did seem to stop going to space. Why was that? They stopped sending people to space? Very strange. And then SpaceX and Virgin Galactic now are, and Blue Origin are all about to go to space again, right? They just can't get there for some reason. It's very odd. But, you know, it's even more odd to me that you would take a person with ALS up in a zero-G plane called the Vomit Comet because it makes almost everybody puke and subject Stephen Hawking, an ALS victim, to that torture. I think that would probably be torture for them. But who am I to know, really? Now, the really weird thing, the most odd thing and strangest thing, I think, about this whole video is that Stephen Hawking visited CERN. He visited CERN. And this man he's standing with, I think, is a physicist and from earlier decades, but visited CERN a lot. I've seen him in other videos, but Stephen Hawking went to CERN. And you know what? It's interesting. He went to CERN not once, but 2 different times in his life. Isn't that interesting? And here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. So let's look back at our slides, because here's the article from Wikipedia. Not that it's a good source, but it did have the information. It says now this is, that picture you just saw this was in 2006 that he visited CERN, when the Hadron Collider was, I guess it was completed. They were doing experiments already with it, whatever. But this is that time in 2006 when he visited. But he also visited at a totally different time in 1985. I don't know if you remember that story or not, but we're about to read it. During a visit to CERN in Geneva in the summer of 1985, Hawking contracted pneumonia, which in his condition is life-threatening. He was so ill that Jane was asked, Jane Wilde, his first wife, if life support should be terminated. She refused, but the consequence was a tracheotomy, which would require round-the-clock nursing care and remove what remained of his speech. The National Health Service would pay for a nursing home, but Jane was determined that he would live at home. The cost of the care, blah, blah, blah. One of those nurses that was employed at this time was Elaine Mason, who became Hawking's second wife, after he got tired of being cared for night and day by Jane Wilde, apparently, which is just a very odd thing. Very odd. So that visit was his second visit in this shot. And I couldn't find any pictures of his visit in 1985. There's no photos of that. But here's what's super amazing about this. Do you remember this, where we compared these guys, all these different timelines? You want to know what these blue lines are? These 2 blue lines? Those are the points at which he visited CERN. So when he visited CERN in 1985, they said he got pneumonia, and it was so bad he ended up with a tracheotomy, right? And we see that in some photos here. We do see that. If you can see, Now it's interesting. They said in 1985, so I probably should move the line a little bit. Let's see, I can move it because that photo, I think I see the trach right here. Let's see. Let's just move this line, move it over here because it looks like he's got the trach in this photo and this photo. So obviously they did use the trach tube on this person, both these people, right? Because there's no way I believe these are the same people. So you can see it in that shot right here. There's the trach tube on his neck, and there it is again. So in 1985, he went to CERN, he gets pneumonia, he needs a trach, he gets it. Now this guy, you can see in these shots, 1989, he's got a trach tube right there. You can see it, just the hint of it there on his neck. You can see it easily in that shot. But this is two different people we're talking about. Two different people. One guy here, one guy here. And guess what? He visits CERN. He, quote, gets pneumonia, needs a trach. He can't speak anymore. And guess what else happens? His first wife leaves him about this time. And guess what? He gets a new wife. Because apparently this visit to CERN and contracting pneumonia changed his life so much he became a new man. And then again, in 2006, he visits CERN. And wow, it seems like it's out with the old and in with the new again. Doesn't it seem like that to you? So what is it about the visit to CERN that is required for them to switch out their man? To switch out Stephen Hawking for the next Stephen Hawking. I'm surprised actually after knowing this and seeing it that they didn't do it again in 2018. After this guy got too old and started to pass. I think he was too old at this point. I think they were worried people would start catching on to what had been done over the years to these three individuals. These three guys. And by the way, I do have a couple anomalous photos that I have no idea who these guys are because they don't look like any of them. This guy. Do you see this guy? That doesn't look like our man. Doesn't look like our man at all. I couldn't really place him in the timeline. Does he look like the bottom guy or the top guy? I really had a hard time with that one. Here's another one that's portrayed as Stephen Hawking. Is that Clark Kent or is that Stephen Hawking? I'm not too sure. But here's some earlier photos of Stephen. And so there's that guy and there's this guy. I'm somewhat confused because that doesn't look much like this guy, but you know, maybe it's just different glasses. Maybe it's a different hairstyle. I just thought that this was a kind of anomalous photo I had a hard time with. So, for instance, this is supposed to be 1960. So that picture on the far left, that's supposed to be 1959, the year before. There's 1959, there's 1960. Is that the same kid to you? He seemed to never do this with his hair, but they portray it as the same kid. And I will say that this nose on the right is quite different than the guy on the left, and that than most of the Stephen Hawking pictures I've ever looked at. And this dimple on the right, I don't remember seeing that particular dimple in any of the Stephen Hawking photos. But it could be just me. It could be I just am not placing that photo very well. But it was purported to be a 1960 photo of Stephen Hawking. Just a couple anomalies there that are hard to place. It's just, we really don't know what all they did. It's really hard to tell what all they did with this guy. So let's go back to our slides real quick. Now there's a reason for everything. This section is about why do we think they wanted Stephen Hawking, the image, the visage of Stephen Hawking around so long. What was their reason? Well, I think it particularly had to do with his ideas of cosmology and religion. So here's the facts. A Brief History of Time, his book, was really single-handedly responsible for the huge thrust behind the Big Bang theory of the creation of the universe, or beginning of the universe. The Brief History of Time was supposedly this wonderful book where Stephen Hawking put all these ideas, and it taught you about why the Big Bang was true, right? I've actually read that book, and I have a plan to do a video just examining the statements in that book and showing the fraudulence of those statements, their total dependence on assumption. But that book was so popular and so pushed by the media that it became the reason that we now have the Big Bang theory in schools, in the media, in public thought and opinion. Now, the rest of these are quotes that supposedly Stephen Hawking said. Heaven is for people that are afraid of the dark, and that a deity no longer has any place in the theories on the creation of the universe. Another one is, all that my work has shown, he says, is that you don't have to say that the way the universe began was the personal whim of God. Another quote is, why still believe that the universe should be logical and beautiful? We just dropped the word God. We still believe that the universe should be logical and beautiful. We just dropped the word God. So he's saying it can be beautiful without God. We don't need God anymore. Seems like he's saying that again and again. Another one. Because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. Spontaneous creation is the reason there is something rather than nothing. Why the universe exists, why we exist. It is not necessary to invoke God to light the blue touch paper and set the universe going. It seems like all of these are removing God from the thoughts of science and from people. He says, what I have done is to show that it is possible for the way the universe began to be determined by the laws of science. In that case, it would not be necessary to appeal to God to decide how the universe began. This doesn't prove that there is no God, only that God is not necessary. So that's here's throwing you a bone, but God's not necessary. It is reasonable to ask who or what created the universe, but if the answer is God, then the question has merely been deflected to that of who created God. Again, you know who I've heard say that about 1,000 times? Richard Dawkins, the top atheist in the world at the present. We are each free to believe what we want, and it is my view that the simplest explanation is there is no God. No one created the universe and no one directs our fate. This leads me to a profound realization. There's no heaven and no afterlife either. We have this one life to appreciate and the grand design of the universe, or one life to appreciate the grand design of the universe, which is a weird thing to say if you don't believe in the designer. And for that, I am extremely grateful, but not to God, he says. So that really is the slides. Now, I hope that you've seen through this kind of what they were trying to do with Stephen Hawking over the years. I feel like their sole purpose was to degrade God in the eyes of the media or the public and in science, so that they would have an excuse for taking God out of both our educational systems and our science papers, and our scientists would no longer talk about God at all. It was a plan to perpetrate upon the public the idea that God does not exist. And you have to ask yourself, why would they go to such lengths and deception with the 3 Stephen Hawkings that we have now seen, at least 3, just to make the point that God does not exist? If that was actually the truth, you'd think they wouldn't have to work so hard, right? But the problem is that is the truth, that God does exist. And that this was a huge lie perpetrated on us and perpetrated on the family of the real Stephen Hawking for the last century. because the original guy they used for Stephen Hawking, they probably didn't know what they were getting into. I don't think, honestly, my feeling is that he never spoke other than the mumbles. And nobody really understood the mumbles once he got into the mumbling stage. So they used the artificial voice to perpetrate this lie. They saw him in his condition and said, man, we can use that. They probably gave the family some deal so they could do this with him. They probably gave the family some, hush money and said, we're going to use him for the betterment of mankind. They're going to do all this stuff with him. They probably didn't tell them all the things they were going to do with him. But they said it's top secret, but we're going to use him for the betterment of humanity. And here's the hush money. If you ever go back on it, we'll kill you and take you out of the picture. And so they used that Stephen Hawking. Then they used these other two guys as time went on, and they wanted to continue the narrative because you know what? We were stubborn. We didn't want to hear that God was not the creator because we all believe he's the creator, most of us. And that the lies that they're pushing, they're trying to push so hard because they know it's not true. They want us to believe it though. They want to destroy our belief and our faith in God. They want to destroy our belief in that so that they can control, so that they can use and abuse us. That's their whole goal. They knew that if God was in the picture, the people of faith would never give up control to the evil workings of the military-industrial complex, the evil workings of the Satanist Luciferians. They've perpetrated these lies on us for long enough, and it's just ridiculous that we had to put up with that for so long. And it's hard because we didn't have all the information. When I was a kid and we'd see Stephen Hawking on TV, it would be cool. It was like this. It was like this television commercial from 1980. Stephen Hawking.
I had always hoped to see this in my lifetime. I have been wondering about the mysteries of the universe.
Stephen Hawking plus planets plus space. Awesome. And then, then they put him on things like Star Trek.
Stephen Hawking in Star Trek.
But then I said, in that frame of reference, the perihelion of Mercury would have processed in the opposite direction.
That is a great story.
They had to portray him as the smartest man alive so that you couldn't question him. And then on top of that, the fact that he was disabled made it so you really didn't want to question him. You didn't want to shed any doubt or shade on him because then you'd be seen as like a mean person who hates disabled people or has no sympathy for his condition. So the combination to the CIA or whoever the intelligence agencies were that used and abused these people for this purpose, they saw gold in this, where they could use him. They could use his condition to perpetrate these lies. And they, of course, put him in Hollywood media with people like Einstein and Sir Isaac Newton and Data from Star Trek. It's really stupid, actually. It's really actually very stupid. And there he's supposedly playing cards. Watch this. They call him, he calls, and so he's going to lay down his cards.
Wrong again.
He doesn't do anything, but his cards go down. It's so funny, like when you watch it back and you think about this stuff. Here's a video of him at MIT, supposedly, in 1994. Now this would have been the second Stephen Hawking, the second one. It seems that the second Stephen Hawking, number one, his head is really tilted to his right, really tilted. The first Stephen Hawking, that wasn't an issue. In fact, I think he could move his head from side to side a little bit. This Stephen Hawking, his head is tilted to the right. His lip has this snarl in it. and his left hand is turned kind of backwards to adjust this joystick. This is the time where they changed this chairs for the second Stephen Hawking because of the way his arms were. They were different than the first Stephen Hawking. They had to move the joystick to the left side of the chair and put the voice, artificial voice panel on the right. And so this is what they did to perpetuate this lie. Now you see this guy he's crippled, he's disabled, and he sees the screen moving because there's someone probably in another room that's actually through radio controlling this computer at this screen to make it look like words are being constructed. Okay? And so he sees the lights moving and he's totally disabled. He sees it and he's like interested in the movement on the screen. So it all worked in their favor. It looked like he was focused on the screen, and then they would say, oh, he's making his sentences up. He's making his words right now. But there's no movement. You can see that there's zero movement. Watch his hands. Is there any movement? Is there any cheek movement? Is there any movement whatsoever?
Technology has transformed the outlook for the disabled. People like me can now move around independently. And they can communicate.
Now, the interesting thing is how fast he's speaking. Now, if you remember from the screens we saw, it's just words on a screen where he would have to move between words and pick the right words. There's nothing about this interface, and I know interfaces because I work in software. This interface is not controllable by a simple touchpad or a movement of a cheek. There's not enough input in that type of movement to control a left, right, up, down situation and the choosing of words and the movement across a screen. There would be a left, left, left to move to the third column. There's no cheek movement going on here. There's no hand movement going on here that could do that. Here's another shot of that. If this is his screen and this is what he's trying to manipulate, it's literally a list of words. Now, do you think in the time that we were just watching that he could actually construct the words fast enough to make these sentences?
Technology has transformed the outlook for the disabled. People like me.
Now, did you see that the time between those two sentences was like 3 or 4 seconds? There's no possible way even if that was a touch screen, I wouldn't be able to construct those sentences that fast. So he's definitely not constructing the sentences in real time. In fact, I looked for a video where there was anything like him responding to a person in a conversational way. And I did find this one from 2015.
What can you see on Mars?
All right. Did you hear what he said? What can you see on Mars? And then, honestly, this guy talks to him for now about 3 minutes. And then he waits. He waits then, after he's talked. And what filters the street light? He's supposedly asking this man, having a conversation with him about this telescope, but he only says one little thing and then the other guy talks for 4 or 5 minutes without letting him speak again. Does that sound like an interchange, like a back and forth conversation? No, this is scripted and or controlled from a separate room by other people. And there's no conversation going on with this person right here. This person is a disabled person who needs constant care. He can't eat by himself. He can't change his clothes. He can't do anything. He can't push a touchpad and control which words he's going to say next. This touchpad over here is too complicated for me to use fast. It is way too complicated for an invalid to use fast. Whether he's the smartest person on earth or not, there's no possible way this communication could happen like this. And all the videos that I found gave evidence of just that. Now here's an interesting one when he sees the Pope, Pope Francis. Is this Pope Francis? No, that's Pope Benedict. But here's the video. So the setup is he's meeting Pope Benedict. Now look at his screen right now. Look at his screen. Can you see that? His screen right there. Watch that screen. See, it's moving, it's changing. So this would indicate that Stephen Hawking is at this moment coming up with words and sentences to say to the Pope, right? But what happens? The Pope barely acknowledges him. There's no interchange between the two, and the Pope walks away. He's done. Oh, and Reuters cuts the feed right there because you know what? They can't show you him having a conversation with anybody because, again, this being when was that? I don't know. This is probably, I'm thinking this is the third Stephen Hawking right here. And he's disabled too. In fact, he, I think, had less movement than any of the Stephen Hawkings. The first Stephen Hawking could actually move quite a bit. The second one, a lot less. And the third one, almost none. But that screen, man, that screen's going wild, right? The screen is going wild. As he's choosing words to say, but the Pope doesn't want to hear it. The Pope doesn't seem to care. He's just looking at it like, oh, wow, he's making words. Well, when does he speak? He doesn't wait around for it. He just walks off. These are the things you have to think about. You have to examine and think, man, why is it like this? Why is it so odd? Why is it not straightforward and easy to understand what's going on here? It should be a lot more easy to understand, but it's not. And if you were just interested to see the zero-G flight of Stephen Hawking in 2007, there it is. Wow. It's so hideous that I think they were torturing this man. And this was the second Stephen Hawking just after he had visited CERN, and they switched out him for the third Stephen Hawking. So this Stephen Hawking was not seen anymore after this. The third Stephen Hawking was used completely and exclusively after this event. I'm surprised he didn't puke on them, honestly, because it's just crazy that they did this to an invalid. This is what an invalid does when you stop throwing him through the air in zero-G environment. He lays down and can't do anything except maybe force a smile. And that, honestly, I've been around enough invalids or convalescents to know that when they have people around them making noise and touching them, they like that. It's comforting to them. And so he's probably just smiling and being the friendliness of it. He likes the people. But he's not. He's a complete invalid. We have to be aware of what's going on here. And they just, I just can't stand that they throw this stuff in our face and they abuse people like this. It kind of hurts, honestly. It hurts. But I hope you see what's going on. And that what they did with this man and what they did to us using this man, all three of him, because it's just a shame what we've allowed to happen in this country. We have these intelligence agencies that perpetrate these lies to us. Who knows how many people they've replaced to perpetrate lies like this and keep narratives going and trick the public, change the public mindset on certain topics. Is it dangerous to them that we believe in God as the creator of the universe and not in a big bang that's unexplainable and irrational and that only makes sense when you scrawl numbers on a napkin and say that's how it is? No, they had an agenda. I think that agenda is dark. I think it was part of their agenda to keep Christians particularly, but people in general, blind to the knowledge of God and his design in the universe. And we saw from his quotes that that's what it seemed like the message was over and over and over again. So whether you thought this was the real Stephen Hawking or the one prior or the one before that, I am sorry if you felt that you were tricked by that. Because I think all of us were in some way. We didn't know what was wrong. We knew something was wrong. I remember seeing him early on and thinking to myself, I don't think he's really talking because he's not moving. Without any movement, there's no way you can talk. And we back then, when he first started using that artificial voice, by the way, we didn't even have sensitive enough equipment to sense cheek movements and hand movements that you can't see, they're so small. So it just doesn't make any sense. The puzzle pieces do not fit together, and from the photography we've examined, the three Stephen Hawkings all were perpetrated upon us as a lie to tell us a message that someone wanted us to hear, a dark message, to keep us from the knowledge of the true nature of the universe. Just let that one sink in as you go to sleep tonight. Thank you for joining me.